Thanks very much, Jane, and thank you for asking me to do this. For anybody that doesn't know me, I love talking about Agile. And the fact I've been doing it for so long probably explains some of the grey hair as well, quite a lot of the grey hair. So what I want to talk about today is Agile transformation, what good should look like, and also a few caveats of things to be aware of, whether you're a recipient or a deliverer of Agile transformation. So yes, I Agile transformation coach, because I've got a lot of experience in Agile. I do most of my work in the complex corporate world, so I don't get the simple, could you just help us do X? I get the complicated ones, or could you come in and sort out something because it's in a mess? So basically, I've been around quite a long time. I think that just says. So what I want to talk about today is just a little bit about what is an Agile transformation. Is it a silver bullet? Will it solve the impossible? And then I'm just going to talk through my typical steps for successful transformations. But just to say that the views expressed here are my own, based on my own experience of delivering and rescuing Agile transformations. I'm not saying this is the only way. I'm just talking about what I've seen that works and what doesn't work and what to be careful of. So I'm not dissing any other way. So one of the things I'm seeing more and more, which in a way is really good compared to 20, 30 years ago, is there's a lot more talking about Agile. There's also an awful lot of bragging about Agile. So you often go to conferences and somebody will stand up or there's a large corporate announcement that said, we are now Agile. We have now transformed to Agile. We just do Agile. The reality is often slightly different. So when people say they've transformed to Agile, I often know who it is that the company that's talking about this. And I love this cartoon, this sort of complex structure. And at the bottom, there's this little red thing is our Agile project. And quite often people talk about we've transformed. In reality, they've got one very small piece of Agile in a large organization. That isn't Agile transformation. So Agile isn't just getting a small pocket working. An Agile transformation means change at the higher levels. And what you see is if people say we've transformed to Agile, if you don't make any changes at the higher level, it's a bit like running an engine at full revs for too long. You get gnashing of teeth and smoking, and then things blow up. So, for example, if you do Scrum at the lowest level, it might be working really well. But as soon as it hits the upper levels within the organization, you get problems. So Agile transformation, it's not a quick fix. It's not an instant binary cutover. Yesterday we were traditional and today we're Agile. It just isn't like that. There's also still a perception out there that Agile transformation is an IT thing. And people say, oh yes, we're introducing Agile, we're using Scrum and Jira, so that's job done. That is really, really far too simple. The Scrum is an approach, Jira is a tool, and they're great, and they're good at what they do. But if we don't address the people thing, then again, it's not a successful transformation. So an Agile transformation is basically a major change program. And like any change, it's got to be done properly. You've got the sort of curve of change where people go from being worried to being extremely frightened, and there's lots of change going on, and then they come out the other side. But if you introduce Agile properly, then it does involve significant behavioural change. And also importantly, it's not just about IT. A lot of the work that I do is talking to business people about how it's going to impact them. And the reality is it eventually can affect everything from procurement to recruitment, as well as accounting. So we start small and eventually we take over the world, but it takes a while. No, seriously, it is a major change program. So the thing for me is that it's really important to get the early steps right if you want success later on. If you start on the wrong footing, then quite often it goes horribly wrong. So the first step for me is about making the right choices. So I talk about the fact you need to understand, never ever assume you know exactly what should be done. So every transformation is different and it depends on a number of things. So for example, organisation maturity. If you're dealing with a startup company, it's a very, very different set of issues to dealing with a long-standing company with significant legacy. If you're a startup and it goes wrong, you can fold down, start up again under a new name with new funding. If you're a long-standing organisation with significant legacy, you've got to work out how you deal with the legacy. You've got a different grouping of people, and you can't just afford to get it wrong and then shut down and start again. You've usually got shareholders as well. I also want to understand what's driving the change. If everything was perfect, nobody would be asking to do this. So usually there's something behind this request, we need to go agile, that is driving the need for change. I'm also very interested in who owns the change. So ideally, it needs to be somebody that's senior enough to make the change happen, to help embed it. If you start too low down in the organisation, people don't have the clout sometimes to deal with the senior management that might need to make some changes. And then, are there any specific constraints that need to be thought about? Like, is this organisation formally regulated? So we did an agile change with a company that was so formally regulated because they did safety critical work. So you have to be doubly careful there. Also, things like, what is the workforce skill level about? What is the level of skill within the workforce? Some are highly skilled, some have skills, but they perhaps haven't changed recently, and making a change is a big step. Certainly, it's never going to be one size fits all. I never go into an organisation knowing what the answer is, because until I talk to people, I don't know. So the first thing I start to do is I go in and I ask questions. I need to understand this organisation and its current issues. What is going on here? Why am I here? What are you interested in? Because I'm not going to just come in and flick a switch and make everything fine. So what I normally do is I try and talk to people at different levels. So the senior management will give me their view, but to get the proper picture, I need to talk to levels within the organisation, from the middle layers, the bottom layers, the staff view, the management view, and often the management view, the senior management view and the staff view is very different. Both views are important. So I did a transformation a while ago, and when I went in to talk to them, because they told me what the problems were, I said, no, I need to talk to your people. And we set up a series of about 15-minute interviews. So just to talk to people sort of honestly. And I said, I won't report back on this. This is between me and them. This is not going to go back to you as a report. And this will tell you, this will tell me what's going on, both your view and the people at the sharp end as well. So that to me is really important. The other thing about understand and never assume, a couple of caveats here. First of all, if you are an organisation, you're a customer, be very wary of the organisation or the consultant who arrives in with the solution for you. Here, let me tell you what your agile solution is going to be. How can they possibly know what you need? What's the right solution for you? So I'll just share the worst example I ever came across. I will anonymise this to protect the guilty. I was working with a very large, global, very successful company, very rich shareholders, and a lot of business. And they'd invited an agile guru, apparently, to come in and just chat to them. And I was already in there doing agile. So they said, would you like to just sit in and listen? So I did. And this guy came in, and he was, to me, the worst sort of consultant. Huge ego, very, very little empathy. And he came in and he said, well, this won't take long. He said, I've got a short presentation for you. It's just 2 slides. So he put the first slide up, and the first slide said, well, I won't say exactly what he said, but he said, what you do is rubbish. I can't tell you what the second slide said because he was thrown out after the first slide. That is not the way to take on an agile transformation. Caveat for consultants, beware the customer who invites you in and then tells you exactly what you need to be doing. So how do you know this is the right solution for this customer? So again, I can't push through an agile approach that is not the right fit for this customer. So being told we want you to implement Scrum, in my experience, is often based on somebody with a very limited understanding of agile. And also, I found quite often that when I go and talk to people, they quickly look up Agile on Wikipedia so that they can tell me, show me that they understand Agile as well as I do, which is not true. Second asking is asking why. What are the drivers? So what is driving this particular change for you? And in my experience, it's to address a specific business issue. For example, we need to respond faster to market change. We're getting left behind. We need to deliver better quality solutions because we're building things that when they go live, they don't work, or sometimes they don't go live. We need to be more flexible. We're looking to expand into new areas. We need to be more flexible in the way we work or the way we deliver solutions. So these help me understand what the change needs to deliver. What are the areas that they need to focus on? They also help me understand what is working well, because we need to protect that. So with an Agile transformation, I do not expect to be coming in and changing everything. All companies are successful in certain areas, and within reason, we'll protect the good within reason. Once I know what's working well, then I can start to see the boundaries. And what I find is that most transformations require compromise on both sides, both myself as the consultant and the customer. So there's give and take on both sides. So if I understand the boundaries, I can see where I may need to compromise, but also where my customers may need to compromise. So the way forward is typically somewhere in the middle. In other words, if you're doing an Agile transformation, it needs to be Agile. It needs to be done in an Agile way. And what we're doing is evolution rather than revolution. So we don't chuck away everything you do now. We will build on what you've got. We'll build on the good stuff and then add on some extra facilities, some extra skill sets, some extra options. Then I start asking why about the process. So again, be wary of being told this is the way we do it, because typically I end up politely challenging the process, the ways of working. Why do you do this way? Because in my experience, quite often the logic behind the process is what's important. And all too often the processes that are being quoted to me have often been built around historical problems and are still in place long after the problem went away. So just because we've always done it this way, or we've done it this way in living memory, doesn't mean it's the right way moving forward. So sometimes I hear what we need is another one, but just like that one. The reality is you wouldn't have another one just like that one if that one was working perfectly. So the logic behind the process is important. And also understanding the logic behind the process is equally important for using Agile. So I don't want people just to say, oh, I've got the book, I'll follow the book letter by the letter, because that's not going to work. Agile itself has to be Agile. So even if you have a standard way of doing Agile, you're going to have pieces of work that won't follow the book exactly for good reasons. So part of being good with Agile is knowing what you can bend, when you can bend it, and when actually to leave it alone. So certainly when I'm coaching, when I'm training, I also talk a lot about why this thing that I'm explaining to you is important, what this thing achieves. So understanding the logic helps. So the next thing, once I've had a look, I need to agree the strategy and I need to start communicating. So that's my second step. So the way that works is I assess. So I take the feedback I've been given and I start putting it together and I start thinking about which Agile approach or combination of Agile approaches would be best here. And I've signed up to the agnostic Agile approach. Certain Agile approaches I like, but I don't have one I push above all others. So if it's Scrum that the organization needs, I talk about Scrum. If it's Scrum plus Agile PM, I talk about that. If it's SAFe, I'll talk about that. So I don't go in with a preconceived solution. I work out what this particular customer needs. Having assessed, then I will position what I think with the senior stakeholders. And the focus for my talking to them, my presentations to them, is what are the benefits for you? What's in this for you? Because they need to understand that. It's not, oh, just Agile will sort everything. So I take their problems and I feed back to them, right, what Agile can do for you in this problem area is this, this, and this. So the way we can help you deliver better quality solutions is by taking early feedback with the people that are going to be working with it, instead of working in a black hole, for example. But I make sure I'm always honest. I won't promise the impossible. If something is going to be difficult, if there's going to be impact to the customer, I'll explain what the impact is, but why it's important, why we need to do this. And again, relate it back to what's in it for you if we can resolve this issue. Then, provided that the customer is happy, I then start the communication properly. And I do lots of short informal sessions. They may be general ones, open to everybody, or they might have a specific focus. So I might do a group or senior leadership team. I might do a specific role. So I've done training for groups of BAs or groups of project managers. I might focus on an area of the business. What does this mean to procurement? I might focus on a single topic. So all of the above, I use different little sets, and I set up a set of webinars or little bites that people can go back and look at if they can't attend the session itself as well. So I build up the collateral to support what I'm doing. What I want to do is build a consistent, correct message of what this is and what it means. And my objective, apart from building a base of accurate agile information, is doing these sessions lets people see that I'm approachable, and then I'm on the side of the organisation and the individuals. I'm not here as a consultant just selling you something and walking away. It seems to work because I've had a lot of very long-standing relationships with customers. In fact, I've just gone back to a customer. I did about 5 years' work in a large organisation. The management team have recently moved on to a new organisation, and they dug me out of my attempts to retire and said, will you come and do work with us again? And I'm now doing that. Well, I've said I'm not going to do it for the next 5 years. I must retire at some point. So what we need to do with the transformation is to bring people on side as early as possible. And what you find with an agile transformation is there are 3 categories of people that you need to deal with. People who are sort of depressed about this, they're anti-agile, or they're extremely cynical. And you hear oh no, not another fad. Agile's just another thing. It'll be gone tomorrow. You're promising everything here today, gone tomorrow. These are people they're also people who sometimes believe that Agile is anti-quality, anti-governance, and only supports quick and dirty. So they're concerned about this being introduced. You get the wildly enthusiastic people. These are typically people who believe or hope that Agile is anti-quality, anti-governance, and supports quick and dirty. So similar worry to the people above, but they see it as a positive rather than a negative. And then the third group are the people who want to wait and see. That let's see how this pans out before I make any commitments to it, which is absolutely fine. The interesting thing for me as a consultant is I'm fine with number 3, but 1 and 2 both need very careful handling. So one of the problems I have in a recent transformation is people that think they know Agile, but actually are doing it wrong. So where I am at the moment, there's a bed of Scrum people that have been doing Scrum for a while, but they're not actually doing it right. And they're saying, oh, we know how to do this. And somehow I've got to help them understand that what they're doing is actually quick and dirty, and it needs to be a little bit more structured than that. Also need to address the fears and misconceptions for people. We need to get these misconceptions and fears out into the open. So one of the examples I see, it's the real worry, Agile's coming in, it's going to be the only solution here in the future. And underlying that is my experience, or me, I'll no longer have any value. So I have to reassure these people that this is not a throw everything out you've done and take on something new. It's about saying all your previous skill is still value. What we're doing here with Agile is we're adding an extra stream to what's on offer. And for a lot of you, this will be useful. For some of you, you will be perfectly happy just staying outside Agile, and that's absolutely fine. One of the things I do see a lot, and this is the fault of Agile people, unfortunately, Agile fanatics, I've seen presentations at conferences where particularly Scrum people say, oh, there's no role for a PM in Agile. So people are concerned, project managers, experienced project managers think they're going to be out of a job or be asked to retrain as a Scrum Master. This highlights a flaw in Scrum. Scrum doesn't have the concept of a project, it just delivers in little small sprints. It doesn't have the overarching picture of exactly what we're going to deliver or how we're going to deliver it. It doesn't have the beginning, middle and end of a project. So therefore it doesn't see a role for a project manager. But for me, a Scrum Master role is more like a team leader role, and the project manager sits above that if you're working in a project environment. If you're not, that's fine. Then the project manager doesn't have a role. But for organisations, complex corporate organisations, the majority of them deliver projects. The fanatics, Agile's great, you can do whatever you want. The one that's particularly popular is, oh, it's Agile, you don't do any documentation. And many, many years ago, when we were doing rapid application development, I used rapid application development to avoid doing documentation as a developer. The reality is you have to document, but you've got to document in a different way. So in Agile, the documentation is focused on supporting the solution in production, not writing things down so you can hand it over to somebody else and walk away. Agile will defy the laws of physics, I've been told. We need this failing project delivered next month. Let's see what your Agile can do with it. That's not very helpful. If it's a big piece of work and it's been failing, I can't suddenly compress time and deliver it in an impossible time frame. And the last one, which I still love, particularly at my age, Agile is only relevant for young techie people. So unlike Kevin here, Agile is fine for anyone of any set of thinking of any age, wherever your background is, whether you're business, technical, it's effective for everybody. Everybody uses Agile in their day-to-day life. Most people are flexible in what they do outside work. Some people are never going to be flexible, but most people have the ability to be flexible, which is why the human race has survived for so long. So if I can expose these worries in one way or another, whether it's in coaching or training sessions, then I can help explain to people that this is not something you need to worry about. Trust me, Agile will not ruin your career. You can have extra value here, not be lost. So having agreed the way we're going to work, having started the communication, the next thing is find a pilot. I always joke about being a consultant that quite often consultants start a discussion with, trust me, I'm a consultant, or they'll give you some advice and say, trust me, I'm a consultant. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's the right way to work. So what I always do is take an Agile approach to the transformation. So start to understand the status quo and then look at what we change, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So protect what is working well and keep the focus on where we need to make the changes. So I always recommend starting with the pilot for a number of reasons. One, it limits the risk to the customer. So rather than going out all guns blazing saying, right, we're going to start changing everything, I say, let me prove what I think is going to work for you. Let's start small. Let's find an opportunity for you to see what I'm about, what this means for your people to see how this works. And then once we've done the pilot, you can decide for yourself, do you want to continue with this? Do you want to get rid of me and get somebody else in? Do you want to just abandon it and go back to your old way of working? Which has never happened yet for me. But for me, that's a much better approach than trust me, I'm a consultant, just do what I tell you. And it pays dividends. Because what it demonstrates is the empirical and iterative and incremental approach that is Agile itself. So I'm using Agile to demonstrate Agile in action. Also from the pilot, we get early learnings. So for example, a current piece of work I've just been completed was a very, very difficult, it wasn't a pilot, but it was so problematic that I said, right, we'll give it a go, but we're going to have to bend Agile so much, it'll be barely recognizable to anything in the book. But what we did do was we used that to learn how what we were doing could fit in their gating process. So we still got through formal gates, even though we were bending Agile to being extremely agile. So the feedback gives us the learnings to make sure that we tailor the process and the way we're working with this organisation to fit within this organisation itself. Because one organisation does gating in one way, another organisation is a bit more relaxed or a bit more formal. So it's never that simple. So I want to choose an agile pilot, but I want a pilot that is a challenge, but I don't want Mission Impossible. So some of you may be too young to remember the Monty Python dead parrot sketch, but I had a dead parrot when I was brought in and said, right, it's all going horribly wrong, Barbara. We need you to sort things out, and start, we want you to fix this particular one. It's an 18-month project. It's 12 months behind, and we need it delivered in 3 months. So off you go. Go with that one. Show me what your agile can do. And I had a discussion about, I'm sorry, but this project basically died ages ago. It should have been stopped about 9 months ago. This is a failed project. And it was getting more and more like Monty Python, saying, this is a dead parrot. It is no more. And I was saying, this project has died. It really, is not savable. And I walked away from that one because I said, you are asking me to solve something that isn't possible, and agile is not the answer to this. You need to go back and start again with this one. So sometimes you need a polite refusal. So there will be the occasional dead parrot offered for agile pilots. So what I do is I assess potential pilots and I look for certain things. First of all, I look for business commitment. I want an actively engaged sponsor. I don't want the name of the CEO as a token name at the top of the tree. I want a good sponsor to come in and support and champion this project or this piece of work. And a good sponsor makes the difference for me between success and failure. And my description of a good sponsor is often a cross between a Rottweiler and a ferret. A Rottweiler because they're very aggressive and they will push, and a ferret because when they get their teeth into a problem, they won't let go. And I was doing a presentation to a large group of people, and I described my perfect sponsor, and everybody in the room looked at one person. Fortunately for me, he had a sense of humour and he smiles and he said, yeah, that probably sums me up. And I thought, right, this is going to work well because I've got somebody that A, has a sense of humour and B, cares. I look for potential pilots that agile can actually deliver particular benefits. So I love a pilot that can prove a challenge for a traditional linear approach where agile will do a good job. And what I start with, we created a while ago a very simple agileometer, and I use this as a very simple, early starting check. And it looks at 6 key areas which would support successful agile. So what we've got here is 6 statements, and you rate them from 1 to 5. And 5 is the perfect agile environment which you would hope to get to over a period of time. You won't be there on day 1. And 1 means it's a long way from being agile and there'd be risks here. So just to talk through these, the first 3, flexibility on what's being delivered. What level of collaboration do we have and how easy is it to communicate? So in the perfect world, in terms of flexibility, level 5 would be stakeholders are comfortable that change is inevitable and needs to happen to converge on an accurate solution. So using feedback as you go to gradually get to where you need to be rather than expecting to know it up front. They're comfortable with their role prioritising the work. Fixed time, fixed cost, fixed quality, negotiate features is typical agile approach. Understand the scope of the work is being flexed to protect the quality and the deadline of what's being delivered. So we negotiate on features. So that's the perfect world. And obviously, I get people to rate this honestly between 1 and 5. What level of collaboration? So in a perfect world, very high level of collaboration amongst all parties. A one-team culture, excellent working relationships, both internally and externally, whether that's internally or externally working with third-party suppliers or whatever. High levels of trust exist and desire to be helpful is prevalent. Perfect for agile. Ease of communication. So in a perfect world, communication is very easy amongst all parties. So it's a communication-rich environment. People talk rather than share documents. Lots and lots of face-to-face interaction, whether that's physical or virtual. These days, a lot more is virtual. is it easy to do? You know, do the time zones make that possible? I did quite a lot of virtual communication a while ago where I agreed inadvertently to do some work with an organisation that I thought was based in Scotland, and it turned out most of them were based in Australia. So my virtual conversations, interactions were being done at midnight till about 4 o'clock in the morning. But, you know, it was worth it because it was fair, because it was just me and they were all on a different time zone. We want visual information to be readily available. So we expect to be able to do things like prototyping, proof of concepts, modelling. And retrieval of information is easy. We can get at knowledge, information, or data. So those are the first three. The second three sliders are the ability to work iteratively and develop incrementally, advantageous environmental conditions, and acceptance of agile. So perfect world, very easy to deliver benefit to the customer or business by regular deliveries of the overall solution, not a big bang, you know, one delivery at the end. Very easy to work iteratively. Solutions and understanding is refined interactively by delivery and feedback, both formally and informally. A desire to learn and experiment, fail fast being seen as a positive, not a negative, as well as this overarching feeling of think big, start small. That's the perfect agile world. The right environmental conditions. So the working environment is very supportive of working in an agile way, whether that's sitting people together or getting them the ability to communicate, the ability to share things. Having personnel assigned ideally full-time to their work, rather than, you know, I've got somebody's leg on a Tuesday morning, but the rest of the time they belong to somebody else. In an ideal world, people are dedicated full on to an agile piece of work. We don't always get that, but that would be perfect. People are skilled. They've got the right skills. They've got the right platforms to work on. So yes, the tooling and the software, the communication is nice, but very importantly, I'm looking for people that have got the communication skills as well, because that is one of the hardest things to teach. Anybody that's worked with or recently lives with teenagers knows how difficult it is to communicate with a teenager if they don't want to talk to you. So the last thing you need is people in an agile team who don't communicate unless you push them hard to, so tell me what you're doing. Come on, show me what you've got. Explain to me what's happening here. And finally, the acceptance of agile. So perfect is all stakeholders closely involved, fully aware of the behaviours and practices of working in an agile way. They've been trained, they've got experience. Not only are they happy to work this way, but they prefer it. They understand the advantages it brings, and also bringing in the peripheral stakeholders who understand that they need to carry out their roles in an agile friendly way as well. So that's my starting point. And the main thing when we do this in the early days, do not expect 100% perfect response, 100% positive. What the Agileometer does is it gives you an impartial and realistic assessment of the potential risks to agile success. And it gives you also further information where we can potentially mitigate the risk by doing training or one-to-one coaching. But all these contra-indicators go on a standard risk log because there are risks to the agile process. But also, interestingly, some of the traditional risks go away. So the risk in agile of delivering the wrong solution is very, very low, because if you're doing the feedback, you can't deliver the wrong thing. So if I get lots of low indicators, that suggests this one is possibly a mission impossible. Being an old cynic, I'm very suspicious if I get all responses of high. I was asked to assess with an organisation. They've got 5 candidate projects to be the pilot. So I read up with them the night before, and then I spent the day with the customer, and the project managers all came and presented their project. And one guy came and he presented his project, and we went down all of these, and the answer to all of them was 5. And when he'd finished, I said, well, that doesn't sound like the project that I read up about last night. You know, can you tell me why you've got 5? He said, well, I love Agile. He said, I'm so keen to be the pilot. I thought, you know, if I say they're 5, you'll let me do mine as the pilot. And I had to explain to him that that is not how risk management works, that you pretend it's nice because you want to do it this way. The reality is certain projects are not suitable for full-on Agile. They're just not. Agile doesn't bring any benefit if you need another one that something you've delivered previously and it's just a repeatable process. There isn't enough uncertainty, volatility in there to give you the value from Agile. I also look out for particular areas that often cause internal friction. So quality is a particular one. I need to understand how formally this is assessed, in a range of 1 to 5. Is it do whatever you like? Quality is, we're not worried about that. Or is it very, very formal? Are we highly regulated? It's not a stopper, but I want to know how quality is assessed. So I don't want people coming with the standard tick list. I want to be able to discuss what you're trying to prove. So being told I want this as a signed off Word document, my challenge would be, why do you want a signed off Word document? What are you trying to prove? Well, I'm trying to prove you understand the requirements. Yeah, but we do it differently. So I'll have a signed off final list at the end, but in the middle of the project, we're still agreeing the low level detail. The good news is that Agile has proved to work very, very well in highly regulated environments, so pharmaceutical, aerospace, technology. So I've done Agile at CMMI level 5. The only complaint I had was they had to redo some of the documentation. I've done it introducing ISO 9000 and something, and somewhere in the kitchen I've got the mug I was given to prove that we passed. So there's no blocker, I just need to understand. What about gating? Is there formal gating? The nice thing with Agile, particularly something like Agile PM, is it has very natural gating points. But the gating points are different to, for example, Prince stage gates. So you're not signing off at the end of Foundations that you know everything and now you're just going to develop from there on in. In Foundations in Agile PM, you're approving that at this point you know enough to predict an end date, but you've got flexibility in the requirements. So again, we need to have early discussion around the gating to make sure that both sides understand what we're doing before we get problems coming to the surface. So prepare the way forward. So what I do is I organise training for the pilot team and the stakeholders, and it's a mix of formal training and one-to-ones, it depends, helping people understand what to expect and also what's expected of them, really importantly. So I don't want them thinking, oh, it's one phone call a month. It's going to be a number of interactive sessions. We need, you need to make the time for this. It's not just IT going away and doing their stuff. I need time from the business. But it starts to reassure people that Agile isn't unstructured chaos. And I work out what level of support I need. So how, when and where I'll do one workshops, bite-sized sessions, but also one-to-one coaching schedules for key roles or groups. So I've recently been doing some one-to-one coaching for my business sponsor or my technical coordinator, technical architect roles. And also things I have to consider are things like locations and time zones. They can make it difficult. How mature? What's the level of experience within the team? If you've got a mixed level of experience and maturity within the team, you have to handle them slightly differently. My background is languages, and I have a thing about the use of words. And I'm very, very hot on things like how we use the language. So in Agile, feedback is feedback, it's not a bug. So I won't let people register feedback as a bug. And I talk a lot about we accept rather than sign off. And it has a very different feeling. So I start changing the language, and people know me for that. I pick them up on words. So we've identified our pilot, we run the pilot. So the team, the stakeholders have got all the information they need, we're ready to go. What I do is I make sure that I am available and accessible as much as is needed. And these days it's not necessarily about me sitting on site with the team, because most of my teams now work from home, work in the office, split sites, split time zones, all sorts. But I make sure that I'm available. And if somebody needs me urgently, if possible, I can usually talk to them within half an hour or so. But I'm certainly make sure I'm available at things like gate points or day-to-day as they're taking on new practices. So the first time we've done group estimating, the first time we've done sprint planning, I will be at those sessions. And the support that's provided needs to be done formally, organised and informally. So there needs to be room in there for a help me, I'm having a really bad day. Okay, well, you know, you've got some time at lunch. Bring your sandwich and we'll talk it over lunch. Also, making sure that we run regular retrospectives to inspect and adapt, and then taking that feedback and feeding it back into the process. So the process, even in the pilot, starts to mature for this particular customer. But the main thing is expect the unexpected. Things never, ever go to plan. So be prepared to adapt and be prepared to compromise. In other words, be agile about being agile. So a recent thing that I worked on, it was going incredibly smoothly until we started the testing for the cloud. And it went very pear-shaped for things that were completely out of control, and it caused problems for us. It wasn't a showstopper, and it wasn't something that Agile could have predicted either. It was just a problem, and we had to adapt and we had to compromise. And then from there on in, retrospect and build out the change. So there are a number of ways you can build on this, and being a consultant, my answer is always it depends. So we could run a second project with the same team. Benefit, the team know what they're doing, they know what to expect, but it does limit the spread of what we're doing. Alternatively, you could take the amoeba approach, split the team, create two teams with a mix of experience and you in each team. That spreads the experience wider, but it does disrupt a performing team. So is that a good idea at this point or not? Pilot in a new area of the business. So take what you've learned, take it to a new team and a new pilot project in a completely different area of the business, building on the lessons we've learned, which is a great opportunity to test what we've done so far with a new group. So that's always a good one. And then as you get more experience and knowledge, start to tackle the different areas and the difficult people. But not everybody is going to want to or will transfer to Agile way of thinking, and that is perfectly okay. So we are not doing a binary switch. So, you know, the goal is not going to be that everything's 100% Agile. I haven't got a single organization that I work with, complex corporate organization, is 100% Agile. There is always stuff that is more traditional. Yes, I'll plug lots of Agile techniques into their traditional ways of working, but they still have traditional style projects. But the reality is over time, the traditional pull will diminish and the Agile pull will increase significantly. So it will be a decreasing pull for people with the limited skill set. And finally, the end goal for Agile is something like this rather nice picture. Agile is a mindset and it's based around common sense. So things like face-to-face working is the most efficient, focus on satisfying the customers, make sure the solution works, is just common sense. It's not rocket science. Agile gets results, and it gets it through teamwork and collaboration driven by people. So we have self-organized teams working together daily. Agile delivers quality solutions, so it still delivers sustainable deployment, technical excellence, good design, harnessing change. So we deliver a solution that actually works. But Agile, being successful, is about being Agile, not doing Agile. So that means Agile thinking sits at the heart of everything you do. So we're building projects based around motivated individuals. And finally, just key takeaways from this session, hopefully. Make sure the customer-supplier relationship suits both sides. Find somebody to help you who fits with your way of working, your mindset, your style. If you want huge formality, then sometimes you want a supplier, you want a consultant that is more formal. If you want a more relaxed approach, then make sure there's a good fit with, you know, as a customer. You are the customer, choose what you want. Make sure the Agile transformation is delivered using Agile thinking. It sounds absolutely obvious, but it's so often forgotten. And it's rolled out like a sort of an army initiative that you just drive out according to the rule book. That's not the way it works. Start the comms early and deliver honest and consistent messages at all levels. Always tell the truth, but build this consistent understanding of what this means and what it doesn't mean. Remember, this is an evolution, not a revolution. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, protect the good stuff. And finally, remember that compromise is normal. It's not a sign of failure. Okay, so I think that's my full set, and that's just nearly 50 minutes. Sorry, Jay. So, questions?
No worries. Great. Thanks, Barbara. Great presentation. Thank you very much. And we'll wait for people to submit their questions. And at the same time, I'll just put out the survey before I forget it. And if you could complete that, that would be great. There you go. Okay. Thanks, Matthew. If you have any questions, please feel free to type in the chat message, and we'll go through them. If there are any questions in the end that we didn't go through, we will actually send those questions off to Barbara, and we will provide the answers in the emails that we send to everybody.
I'll do my best.
Sure. Thanks. Lots of positive comments, but no questions yet. We'll just wait.
Sometimes it takes a while for the questions to surface.
Yeah, it's a lot of information to take in, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Here's the first question. Very interesting. Is there an overview of Agile and plugin steps that can be used for formal processes?
No, not really, because there's lots of guides on Agile, but they usually talk about each particular Agile approach. Agile transformation is almost separate from the Agile approaches. So I often put presentations together on things that there isn't guidance on. Probably a starting point, you'll get copies of the slides and use these steps, whether you're a customer or a consultant. These would give you the sort of steps to start with. But I haven't... The other thing to look at is good guides on how to handle change. There's a very good book that somebody recommended, which I read, which was called The Change Monster, and it talked about the whole impact of change. Agile transformation is a change like any other. So, I've just seen one on group estimating and sprint planning. Pam, that's a whole different discussion. I'll answer that one separately.
Sure.
Quickly, which is that when I was bored in COVID, I put together an online teach yourself guide to estimating, because I'm actually a trained estimator, and I put this together so people could learn about how you estimate in Agile, the different techniques. It talks about things like estimating, group estimating, sprint planning. So if you're interested, ask Jay or ask KLC and they can send you the information about that one. But that wasn't intended as a sales pitch.
Absolutely. Thanks, Barbara. Yes, Barbara actually authored a course called Estimating for Agile, a foundation course. We actually have that. Feel free to get in touch. Another question is, Barbara, do you have any favorite books on Agile or transformation?
No, I don't read lots of books. Somebody came up to me recently and they got the book, the Agile PM book, which I sort of was my idea. They were chasing me around a conference saying, would I sign it, because they wanted a signed copy, and then they said they'd read it from cover to cover. And I said, I'm surprised really, because we didn't design it like that. We designed it to go in and read. I read Agile books, but I usually dip into them and look up something out of interest, but I don't read them rigorously. I use an awful lot of, for me, Agile's about common sense, and you learn more about Agile by looking at the way you work in the real world and thinking, actually, that's very Agile. I'm driving to a concert next week. I allow extra time, and if I get stuck in a traffic jam, I adapt. So in the outside world, you do Agile. We just need to bring that thinking into work, because it is the most natural thing in the world. My contact details are on the slides, Ebru, so you'll be able to see that.
Yeah, we'll be sharing the slides as well as the video recording. Thanks, Barbara. The next question, do you have any experience whether Agile is commonly used or works well in scientific areas?
Yeah, it can do. I mean, I did some coaching recently with a startup company, and they are, I can't tell you what they were creating, but they're creating something to make a medical piece of equipment reusable. I think that's, it's secret squirrel, so I can't tell you what else. So it's all about scientific research. And it was really interesting working with a startup company, because they have to do enough to prove that they have a viable concept to go for the next round of funding. So it does work. I also have a colleague, and he worked for a pharma company, and obviously a lot of pharmaceutical stuff is very scientific research and proof and evidenced. There's nothing Agile can't do, although some things are a bit harder than others. And some things occasionally I say, no, that's just not particularly suitable for Agile. You're better following a more traditional approach, but hey, let me help you with the communication and collaboration part of your traditional style working.
Great. Thanks, Barbara. The next question, do you have a standard way of presenting results of the pilot and phased delivery to management and teams?
I have a fairly standard way, but it depends on the maturity of the people I'm presenting to. When I present, I'm always me. Unfortunately, I can't do sort of serious and scary. I just come along like some old bat that knows a load of stuff and talks about it enthusiastically. It seems to work, but there's no standard way. It just tell people what they need to know. Communicating bullet points normally. This is a bit wordy, this presentation, so that you've got the detail to take away. But I tell people, communicate briefly, effectively, and to the point. Don't waffle. Be honest, and that's the best way, I think.
Great. Next question. Any suggestions for how to help an organization to develop a culture of being agile?
I can't remember I can't see the name of whoever that was from. Again, when you get these slides, whoever that is, it's got my email on the bottom. I think on one of the slides. If you want to send me an email, I can point you in the direction of a guy that did a lot of work on agile culture, and he's got a set culture assessments is really useful set of materials, and it might be worth your while following up on that one. I think there's a free version that gives you a sort of superficial view, and then you can take it further. So if you come back and ask me, I will send you that information.
Great, thank you, Barbara. And just wait for more questions to come up. Lots of thanks.
It looks like I shan't have any homework to answer then, Jay.
We probably can go through them all now. Yeah. Great. Thanks, guys, for completing the survey. It's very high completion rate on that. Thank you very much for that. I'll just end the poll now.
Well, hopefully it's given people a bit to think about. Either whether you've got experience or you haven't had any experience, Agile isn't scary, and whoever's doing this with you shouldn't be scary. They should be seen on your side rather than in it for themselves. So, I'm getting some thumbs up.
Yeah,
I love these little floating graphics. Yeah. It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Very good kind of communication tool.
It's nice to hear for a complete novice. It's interesting. It's not rocket science. It just isn't. Once you understand what Agile is, you think, oh, we're sort of doing this already. It's just the next step, taking it more formally at work. I'm not sure what a floating bonfire means. That's what went up there. I saw it go through, but I'm not quite sure.
Probably means hot.
Oh, right. Yeah. Not burning bridges then. Okay.
Didn't think of that, but I'm sure not. It's burning those.
Yeah, it is taking people along with you. Jane, one of the problems I have with the transformation is people suddenly want to join my gang, and you get people saying they're doing it or starting to do it on their own bat, and I have to try and stop them and say, no, we need to do it under control until we get this good base. We don't want people doing it off their own bat, doing it wrong, and then using the reputation. Molière's bourgeois gentilhomme, possibly. I knew my French at university would come in useful.
I didn't dare to actually read that question because I can't.
That's fine.
Great. I think we're nearly the time. If there's no more questions, we'll wrap up and close the session. Once again, thank you so much for joining the webinar. Hope you find it useful. We will be sharing the video recording and the slides after within a week of from today.
Can we
Yep.
share the slide straight away, Jay?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yes.
Then
Yes.
people can
That doesn't
actually
need,
see them.
processing. Yeah, absolutely. Great. I will send that out today to everybody who registered. Great stuff. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.
And thank you all for coming, because I enjoyed it. So it was good fun.
Thank you. Thanks, Barbara. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Still got a few left.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not quite sure how.
A few more left.
So I think there's you and me and 4 others. Okay.
Yeah. I think we can just end the session now, Barbara.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks very much for this. We'll speak
Okay.
soon. Yeah. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.